Okay. All right, well, thanks for joining everyone. It's December 19th, and I want this to be the last call of the year. I would like the next one to be January 9th, if I got that right. That should be a Thursday. So we're not here the day after Christmas or the day after New Year's. The week following, I would think. So this will be the last call, and then we'll have a January 9th, I think it comes down to. I didn't look at the calendar. I was just calculating in my little pea brain, so I don't know if I got that right. You guys can correct me. The 9th is a Thursday, yes. Okay, so after this call, the next call is on the 9th. So I wanted to talk about something that will carry over into the next year, 2025. I think I've made it as comprehensive as I could because this know your customer nonsense is making a lot of people crazy. So let's not lose our minds over it. It's manageable. It's like Danny Glover would say, it's solvable, if you watch that movie, The Shooter. Okay, so December 19th, appreciate you joining. Guys, check out my content. I do additional content. I mean, I have content. Some of it that I talk about here, I may put in the membership area from time to time, but I do separate content when I do casework or when I finish research on something or that's technical, I put it in the members area. So members area means a video series that covers the area that I'm doing the video on, the subject, and that's found at aceofcoins.club. Thanks to Jim, he manages that, does a great job. So aceofcoins.club, that's all there. And if you'll notice, I've got a couple more campaigns going out. You're going to see some different things like I mentioned earlier this year. There's cryptosarenot.taxable.com. That's not for you guys, but I'm just showing you that's a promotional landing page I've set up because I'm going to work with some groups of people. And there's another promotional landing page called divorcingthestate.com. So you'll see that's out there, but that's not my core thing. What I want to do is promote the aceofcoins.club because that's where all the content is that you guys care about. And then aceofcoins.com is the website where you can download an order form. You can order the consulting. With the consulting, I include, I set up an LLC in most cases, or I work with yours. Hey there, Elaine.
Hey.
Yeah, we're gonna have a discussion. So you guys, like always, are welcome. Guys and girls, you're welcome to interrupt me. But I'm gonna start this one on the know your customer rules and regs and policies. I'm going to kind of give you my view of all this whole thing, and I've been watching this for years. So the first thing I'll start out with know your customer is the fact that this is what we're encountering when we go open a bank account, when we deal with a financial institution, brokerage account, you're treated like a suspect in a crime. And under the Bank Secrecy Act and the USA Patriot Act of 2001 as amended, and who else? The Customer Information something, and the anti-money laundering law and all these things, right? Okay, so Congress puts all these things. Congress does this, the United States does this, then they have the regulations, then you get all these policing agencies, okay? And that's not good enough though, because these rules are regulating the banking system. The banking system then takes on kind of like a police role, a policing investigative role. So there's some Fourth Amendment concerns there. I'm not saying that's somewhat of a solution. I'm just saying there's some Fourth Amendment concerns there. But I'm going to show you something today, and we're going to talk about this next year on the next call, but I'm going to introduce something to you that we can build upon. And I think maybe there's a strategy that we can use. Now, I did mention, if you don't like the KYC nonsense, and you'll see why it's such nonsense, we kind of have to deal with it. It's in our face because the bank can just say, well, we don't like you. And there's no duty to do business with you. However, there's no legal duty to refuse services when you're not going to give up certain information. Now, granted, you have to give up some information. Traditionally, we kind of have to go along with what's been acceptable for all these years. And that is my identifying documentation, like some government document with my photo on there. Okay, so that is biometric data. I'm not required to create new biometric data, by the way. But like, for example, take a photo, a selfie with me holding my driver's license. That's not a matter of law. That's not even required. I'll go over this with you. But know your customer. Don't be scared of it. KYC does not create a tax liability. It does not create a financial risk or liability of any kind. And there are limitations on the disclosure and acquisition of this data. In fact, it creates all kinds of obligations on the party who's collecting the data, which we've discussed before. This is why we have the lien on the data that's being collected, right? The biometric, all that sort of thing. The identifying information. So I put together something, and I want to go over these points with you. And then there's a core element here that I want to be able to use. So one of the solutions I suggested is if you don't like the KYC, it's being used on you because you're coming to the bank as a single member, small business, whatever, using an LLC for you're putting your savings in there and maybe you're buying cryptos or something like that. You're not running an enterprise in most cases. That's my demographic. That's my customer typically. It doesn't mean you can't do that with an LLC, but for the most part, many of you don't fit the profile of a real small business, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that, but you're kind of being pushed around a little bit. So what they've done is if they've written these laws so that it's to cover you, it's to include you, and to exclude, and I'll tell you what we're looking at. So the rules exclude LLCs, for example, where the ownership doesn't exceed, was it 25%? So that means you have a real board of directors typically, or you have a real partnership going on with a group of people, or you have real investors, something of that nature, and there's 5 or more people, right? So typically, or maybe there's 3, and some of them don't have more than a 20 or 25% ownership. But if you have 5 members in your LLC and one person is the signer, that's acceptable. And maybe the bank has less KYC inquiries, maybe. So my first take on this is if you had more members, if you're working with people and you had groups of people or a group and you kind of worked with each other and you worked it out this way where you can have 5 members, you can also establish that no member has more than 25% interest. It doesn't mean that people that have an interest have to get any money out of the company. They could be nominee owners and the bank doesn't need to know about that. I'm not saying that's a very practical way to do these things that we're using the way you guys are using them. I'm just saying you could get around it by having more membership. Okay. But just the same, there's the presumption. This is important. There's the presumption that you're involved with some kind of crime that the United States has an interest in. For example, some threat to national security, money laundering, drug trafficking, human trafficking, tax evasion, not reducing your taxes, but tax evasion. Okay. And there's unskilled people, even though they have a little bit of training, there's unskilled people that are supposed to be filling the shoes of a police investigator or detective. And because they are not competent to do so, they're going to just report anything that's unusual. So if you're doing something really smart, guess what? The guy that works at the bank that's not that smart thinks you're doing something illegal. So in these laws, there is no definition of suspicious activity, but this is what's being regulated. So the bottom line is because of these laws and because of the consequential banking policies that then the bank goes out and asks you for this information. So the bank should be asking you for things that it would ask you at a deposition, let's just say. So if I go to a deposition and the person taking my depo asked me for some record, a document of some kind, or to answer a question where I don't have the document in my control or custody, or I don't know the answer, my defense or my response can be, I don't know, or I'm not required to go create a document to give it to you to answer your question. We all understand this. So this is, in some cases, this is kind of the nature of what we're doing, okay? So like, for example, you go into Caleb and Brown or Coinbase or one of these. And by the way, I do like Caleb and Brown better because they're just not a bank. It's a nice service. It's a very good service for what you're doing on cryptos. And it's appropriate for crypto investing. But I don't like that they're asking for a photo, a mugshot, really, from all angles with you holding your driver's license. That's asking you to create biometric data that doesn't exist yet until they ask you for it. This is what I have a problem with, okay? And also asking you what you intend to do with the money. The banks ask you that too, and where it came from. That's a question you would ask a suspect in a crime. All right, so that tells you right there that there's a presumption that you're involved or associated with or committing some kind of crime that we just talked about. The national security interest, all this stuff. So if there's this presumption and it's a matter of law, this law says you're going to do this stuff. The presumption is not rebuttable. So if it's not rebuttable, what do we have in this country that allows you to express your objections? What's that called? The right to be what? The right to be heard.
Heard.
Right? Yeah, if you don't,
I was
like it.
I was like, heard.
Yeah, the right to be heard about your objection or opposition to what's being done. So if the law says you have to give this, this, and that, and you say, well, why? I don't want to. And the bank can say, we don't like you. We're not going to deal with you then. They can do that. But just the same, you have a right to judicial review. Just like we discovered in the phony pandemic, all right, when you had rules for hospital employees in New York, they had administrative regulations for New York because they couldn't get the laws passed fast enough. But they had administrative regulations that required, let's just say, a vaccination of employees, okay? Even with that on the books, it's still subject to judicial review because the law itself presumes you are infected with a contagious disease. There has to be a judicial review because maybe you're not. And so you can't be subjected to a medical treatment that may alter your entire life. It's a risk, lots of risk. So there has to be a judicial review in this situation when there's an unrebuttable presumption. I mean, it could be as simple as establishing a residency, which is, by the way, the case I'm going to share with you, gives you this ability. So our government, protects the right to due process, but sometimes it writes laws and wants to forget about the right to due process. And then sometimes someone comes along and says, but wait a minute, this situation invokes that right. You forgot about that one. So we have some nice case law, right? And the case law is Vlandis versus Kline. I'm going to share this with you. So this is a comprehensive thing I'm going to get into. That's why we're going to have to do a couple calls on this. So Vlandis versus Kline, Vlandis versus Kline. I'll get you the citation. Don't try to search it. I'll get it for you. Yeah. So you can come in there with 5 members, right? And the bank can say, yeah, well, we like to collect biometric data. I think there's something else going on with this collection of your data. I think the banks want it. In fact, I think the banks were behind your government doing this sort of thing. But it creates a new set of restrictions if you understand what your rights are and how to enforce them. So in Vlandis versus Kline, it was established by the Supreme Court. The holding was that if you're subject to an irrebuttable presumption, a unrebuttable presumption, as it says, then you're entitled to judicial review or an administrative hearing or an evidentiary hearing to establish whether or not this should be applied to you. So if I'm not involved in any kinds of violations like money laundering or something like that, if I'm not involved in any of that stuff, and I object to what the bank's doing, I can't just go to the bank and say, you're gonna have to open your account for me because I don't like it. They just are not going to do that. But I can go to the judge, and because even though the burden of proof is shifted from the bank and the government that wants to impose these on me, it's shifted to me unfairly. But my option is to go to the court anyways and tell the judge, hey, I unjustly have the burden of proof here, but I'm here anyways. And I want a declaration from the court that I'm not involved in any of these things. And therefore, I shouldn't be required and should not be required to give all this information that's in addition to what I've traditionally been expected to give the bank when I open my account. I'm not a convicted felon in money laundering and things of that nature, nor have I been associated with people like that, right? So we can go to the court and ask for declaratory judgment, and we can ask the court to order the bank to not impose this. And we can also ask the United States not to impose it. We can also ask the United States or require the United States to not impose penalties on the bank. So what you're doing is, what I'm going to show you here in a second, is you can go to the court and get an order that actually protects the bank against penalties imposed by the government for not collecting certain information from you. It helps them and it helps you. But let me just pose this to you. So the fact that we're still talking about there's a problem with money laundering or there's a problem with threats to national security means that what? If we still have a problem with it, and there are other laws before 2001, what does that mean?
The laws,
Yeah, well,
the laws don't work.
solved, at least we know that much. I think every problem is solvable. I'm an optimist. But I think that the United States has not been successful. And I'm going to just be a little dramatic and say, because of the United States' abject failure to solve the problem of these things, these crimes, why should I be penalized? Because you failed to use my money to protect me against these crimes, and now all of a sudden I'm now a suspect in the crimes because you failed? You see how this works? So what the heck do we go? What do? We go to the court, okay, and we ask for this relief. All right. So I'm going to show this in just a minute. Now I have a working pleading, a complaint that if you want to file it, it can be shorter. It needs to be revised. I make it a little dramatic, so it needs to be dialed in a little bit, but it's my first version of it. And yeah, there's an issue of privacy and all this stuff, but you got to weigh the privacy aspects against national security, and that can be done. And I'll show you a couple of things in here. So if you don't have laws that define what you're trying to police, which is suspicious activity, how can you really enforce them? How do you just leave it up to the layman to decide what that is? That means they're just going to report everybody to avoid penalties from the government. And the penalties are substantial. They're like $1 million or something like that. Anywhere from $100,000 up to $1 million against the banks. So of course the banks are going to say, we don't care about the customer. We just don't want the FBI, on our backs. So as you know, just let's get to the basics. So the basics are this, and so many people ask me this, John, do I have to give my social security number? What the banks want is not your social security number. The banks want your credit file information. Well, it makes total sense. Just most people have their credit file under their SSN. Fine. Give them your SSN. Yes, you give it to them. You've always been doing that since the 70s. Okay, it's okay. Give them your driver's license. Give them your passport. Give them your utility bill. They want to establish residency. If you're opening a corporation, just because you're a resident in one jurisdiction doesn't mean you have to have the same residency or your corporation has the same residency as yourself. So those are two separate persons. The reason why you set up an LLC in New Mexico is so that you can have a residence for your company in New Mexico and not in California, for example. Just the fact that you live in California, okay, sorry about that. But that doesn't mean your corporation has to be a resident in California. So that's how that works. But yeah, you give the bank what it's asking for. My opposition here, my objection, and I'm going to give you guys maybe a path where you can get out of this, is the bank's asking for ludicrous, in my opinion, unuseful information that it wants maybe for other purposes. And if you read their statements, and I'm going to get into that in just a second here, I went to, let me get my notes real quick. I picked some banks at random, right? So, and you can do this yourself. So I went to like Coinbase. I went to Coinbase's website. I did a Google search on it and I got what is it called? The user agreement, okay? And it has provisions in there about collecting your data. Then it gets more specific when you go into Coinbase's privacy policy. So you can find this in 1 second on Google. You'll go Google's a great search tool for website content. So you go right there, privacy policy, terms of service, these sorts of things. And so I found it. And of course, they're all talking about the collection of your data. And they're gonna tell you in there that they're collecting your data and it needs to be shared with other parties. And they're very vague about this, which these are items that can be challenged. I'm not going to show you how to do that right now, but it's very vague. So what that's telling you is that there is no privacy at all. So my argument in the whole thing is if you go to Coinbase, Caleb and Brown, I went to Wells Fargo and Chase, right? And I got all their policies and they're all about the same thing. So what we want to do is we understand what's going on here, but to open your accounts, give it the information that's being asked. And I know they're asking for additional biometric data. This is what I'm really going to talk about, and I'll let you figure out what else to do next. But you want to give a W-9. If you're using an LLC, you want to give a W-9 to the bank and any other third parties you're dealing with your LLC where you're opening accounts, because that transfers the liability for reporting correctly. So you don't want, let's say the bank reporting a 1099, for example, or Coinbase or Caleb and Brown, which Caleb and Brown doesn't report, but you don't want somebody reporting money paid to your LLC, for example, and putting your SSN on the document. That's going to be a problem, right? So that's why you give the W-9, because it makes them liable for doing it correctly. A W-9 is not creating a tax liability for anybody. It's a document that the customer is preparing for the payor. So the payee, the one receiving the money, is preparing the W-9, okay? The payor is the one that may send the payee a 1099. See how that works? It's okay to do all these things. All right. Now, if you look at their policies, they'll say things like, we're doing this to protect our customers, which is total BS, as you know. But anyone who's telling you that they're going to protect you, why isn't there a provision that's telling you what their liability is, what their financial responsibility is to you if they don't protect you? If they don't have that in the policy, then they're actually lying to you. So what does it look like if a company says, we need all this data from you so that we can protect you? Well, they're not in the business of protecting you. They're in the business of protecting themselves against all kinds of liability. That's what a business does. So they're lying right there. But the fact that in the policy does not include a provision that tells you how they're protecting you and how they're financially obligated to you if they fail and what constitutes failure, okay? So one of the things in their terms of service or privacy policy that where they're saying they're going to protect the customer in the collection of this data, very sensitive data, is identifying that they have third-party insurance liability coverage if you make a claim for a data breach. Go look for the policy for that. That should be a provision in there. And if it's not in there, you would ask them, write a letter, send them an email, right? Contact the person who's responsible for this and say, I noticed in your policy it says that you're going to protect me against, whatever misuse of my data, right? But what means do you have and what liability do you have to actually fulfill that promise? Are you really doing that? Do you intend to do that? Okay. So that's just something, a tool that you guys can use. So I guess I may have to just show you this as we get into this other aspect. So this is just, I know it's a burden, okay, but I'm just maybe giving you a path that you can follow here. I may try it just for fun. But let me just do a share screen. I'm just going to have to walk you through this because I have some notes. So part of what I've written here is the actual petition you would file in the U.S. District Court to get the judge to order them to stop imposing this policy on you and protect your bank, and they'll leave you alone. That's my thinking, because if the bank has a court order, which I believe you can get quite easily, that would be great for its documentation. And then they could just say, well, we did our best and this is what the judge said. And then they won't have any problem with the United States because they did the best they could, right? That's the whole idea. So let me just do a share here. All right. This should be the one. And so this is what I put together recently. And so you have your standard pleading elements, which is you're talking about, hey, well, here's what I'm suing for. I didn't get into too much detail about how there was a waiver of immunity. I'm sure it's procedural. It probably just comes down to a notice. I didn't get that far, but this is generally what it's going to look like. Now, my first version, it could be 2 pages. You can make it 2 pages. You could probably make it 3 pages. This is my language. I go and I explain to the court, hey, I'm talking about all the KYC rules, okay? And how they led to the creation of the policies that I'm subjected to now. And then I get into these have the consequence of creating the unrebuttable presumption that I'm involved in some of these crimes in some way, okay, that I'm some way liable, right? So I want to make the allegation that, first of all, because of the legal tender laws, I'm forced to use dollars. Otherwise, I'm considered a criminal. I mean, you guys know yourself. If you try to use cash or Bitcoin for something, people think you're crazy, or you're a drug dealer. We're already there. So we're forced to use the US dollars to do things. So once we're forced to do it, now there's a liability on the other side who's forcing us to do it. If you force me to do it, then to get by in modern society, if I try to use cash, like to buy a car or something, or almost for anything these days, I'm considered some kind of drug dealer or a crazy person. If you carry $1,000 in your pocket, right? You know what happens if you try that. So we're kind of forced to use the banking system for our sustenance. Just like we need water, we need food, we need access to a banking service. We need phones, really, in modern society. We don't need guns. I mean, you probably should have a gun, but we don't need them. But we need things to allow us to communicate with each other, and we need resources. We need shelter, we need water, and this sort of thing, right? So this has become a necessary aspect of our modern life, live in society, and not be considered a criminal. But the fact that we're forced to use these dollars and be considered a criminal is a problem. Not only that, we have to use the banking system. So now that our access to consumer goods and services that are necessary, important for just basic living, okay, that now is being commingled with or pinned to the collection, storage, and use, the disclosure of our biometric data, and also the creation of new biometric data just for this purpose. That is the problem that I have with it. You guys should too. I think that's a battle we can win. So I describe here that we are pigeonholed into a situation where we have to use dollars, we have to use the banking system to avoid being considered a suspect in a crime, and yet we're considered a suspect in a crime anyways. And by the way, this is the best part I love, where I go in there and talk about here, the United States, okay, the defendant has created this outrageous, unjust predicament by its own failure to police the crimes it claims to intend to prevent by these statutes. Because of the government's failure, now we have these laws, and now we're subject to these policies, and now the banking system is a police power, exercising police investigative authority, apparently, but it's not. But I mean, it's like more like it's like the mall cop, okay? That's the role that the bank's playing. The problem with that is, in fear of penalties, the bank employees are going to report everything. And they're not sophisticated. So you might be a sophisticated investor doing crazy stuff. And you might use the bank a certain way that might look like a drug dealer. And so you're going to be under investigation because someone's going to tell on you. And you're going to have to deal with the police, the federal government, and the bank's not liable. There's actually a law that precludes them from having a liability for making erroneous reports. And that's another problem I didn't really mention in here. So I'm trying to frame this in a way that tells the judge, look, I don't have a choice. I can't shop around. They're all doing the same thing. You know, I wouldn't be dealing with them, right? A lot of people are trying to use cryptos, right? So anyways, I get into a lot of these things. I want to mention a couple things. So I don't think my underlining stayed here, but I want to mention a couple things. So I did the research on the statutes. And here's what I found is that none of these, the Bank Secrecy Act, none of this legislation explicitly requires the banks to collect your biometric data. I mean, getting your driver's license is collecting your biometric data. However, I don't think it's usable in a format that they prefer. That's why I think they want your mugshot. I think they want you to create a mugshot. None of these laws, okay, the customer identification program or the AML laws require the bank to refuse service to a customer who declines. The bank's doing this. The bank is doing this. So what you want is an injunction against the bank, and you want to eliminate the bank's claim that it has a duty under some law by getting a so it works like this way. You're asking for declaratory relief and injunctive relief. So the declaration is, I'm not involved in any crimes, therefore you're required to not impose these laws on me. You can only go back to the state of things before we had these laws. You can ask me for my ID and this sort of thing, my home address. Okay, fine. But you can't make me create a mugshot for you on demand or update you on new information, et cetera, et cetera. You can only get information that's going to allow you to document what you're doing for financial purposes, not for police power, not for police investigative purposes. None of these laws impose civil or criminal penalties on banks for failing to collect biometric data. It's the bank's choice. Someone at the bank decided he wants it. I really think they're using it for something other than what they're, none of these laws impose civil or criminal penalties for failing to collect information about the origin of your money or the purpose for what you intend to use it. What they're trying to do is use a layman at the bank, an employee who may be an expert at being a banker, but he's not, he's a layman when it comes to analyzing a police situation, right? Whether or not someone's involved in a crime. Of course, somebody at the bank who has experience can look at someone's account and say, well, that looks like this other guy that was over here that was counterfeiting, right? Or money laundering. A bank employee can do that. And yeah, he is qualified to do that, but he's not qualified or competent to get involved in a police investigation. He can just be a tattletale, right? So the problem I have is creating new biometric data and also asking these dumbass questions. So what are you gonna do with the money? I hate that, right? So Section 326 of the Patriot Act requires banks to verify the identity. No problem, but look at what it's supposed to do. Okay, name, address, date of birth, SSN. Okay, no problem. Acceptable verification methods include your driver's license, etc. And it says non-documentary methods. So whatever. I mean, yeah, the government is knowing that the banks are going to do this and collect your biometric data. That's the whole idea. So that way the government can't be accused of requiring someone to collect your biometric data. So there's two aspects here. There's a law that says you have to request this from your customer. The law doesn't say your customer has to give it to you. It just says the bank has to ask for it. It doesn't either say you must refuse service if he doesn't give it to you. This is the bank doing it. So I'm just making that distinction. All right. And this is my argument. the bank doesn't, the act, none of these, but the act does not require customers to create or produce new biometric data. The photograph that everybody hates, right? And of course, there's no definition of suspicious activity, but it's kind of a conglomeration of procedures that they kind of, make up as they go. There's no standard, right? So it's kind of arbitrary. And of course, these numbers are arbitrary, transactions aggregating. This is what you really should understand. Just know that what you see in the movies where they talk about reporting over $3,000 or $10,000, they're reporting everything. All right. If it's not being reported, it's being collected so that it can be batch processed. So everything you're doing is being watched. In fact, everything I write for clients is under the assumption that everything is being watched. I don't want to be, but I'm assuming that everything is. So I want to make sure it's all done correctly. And then you'll see some of this is even being misapplied, right? So you want declaratory relief declaring that you're not involved in any of this stuff. You're not on a watch list. Therefore, you're not subject to these things, nor is the bank subject to penalties for not collecting it. It's just a little bit because we have the ability to do this. I don't think you're going to prevent, you're not going to get a court order saying I can have a numbered account like Jason Bourne. That's not going to happen. If you want such a thing, you got to do it yourself. You got to figure that out. I'm not going to get into that detail. But anyways, so this is the meat of it. Okay, so we have all the allegations up here, and then we get into here's what I'm really wanting, right? I'm asking for a declaration of this, declaration of that. There's no authority for it. There's no legal duty for it. Okay. And I'm not responsible for the government's failure to prevent these crimes. I'm not involved in these crimes. There's no evidence of it, and so forth. And then you want an injunction. The injunction says the court's going to order somebody to do something or not do something based on the declarations. Okay. And then that's it. That's basically the pleading. It's called a pleading, right? And this is generally what you want your relief. And I always ask for a jury trial too. So I know that I'm just telling you, give the bank what it's asking for, but I want you to understand that that's not always the whole case. But give the bank what it's asking for. It's not creating a tax liability, but file your lien. File the lien against the bank who's getting the data. You got to do that. And then if you are so inclined, make a pleading like this, go into court and say, hey, if I'm not involved in any of this stuff, I want a judicial determination that I can rebut the presumption that I am involved in this because there's no evidence of it. There's no evidence of it. I've not been convicted of it. I'm not, on parole or probation or something for those crimes. I'm not associated with people, so et cetera. And therefore, I'm not subject to what this bank is asking me to do or something like that. And when would I do this? Well, I'm going to go about my life and I'm going to go get bank accounts and I'm going to do things, right? And then maybe I'm fed up with this, right? And then I go to the court and I do this. Now, the defense might be something like, if you get to the meat of it, might be something like, well, don't you already have a bank account? Haven't you already done this? Well, that doesn't constitute a waiver. I'm sick and tired of doing it. And it's about time that someone has to make a ruling on this. And I want a ruling that says, I don't have to participate in this. I don't need to be treated like a criminal because I'm living my life. And you guys failed to prevent the other criminals. So I'm not going to be implicated in that. So I want to be excluded from it. So file, you take your, what do you call it? The security agreement, right? For your identifying information. Put a lien on the bank for that. Everything you give the bank, put that in your description and more. Put all of it in there. And then that you can do right now. Everybody should be doing that right now for all the banks. Even PayPal, even Caleb and Brown. I would do it in the United States. I think Caleb and Brown, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Caleb and Brown, didn't they organize something in the United States? Maybe probably to avoid some, no, they didn't.
We just had a meeting on that this morning,
Well, yeah,
and they will do anything they can to keep from doing business from a US address. And they because of all the regulatory.
that's what I thought. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so they do not report to the reason we had a meeting is because they started asking people for their social security numbers and everybody got all freaked out. And Jay told them, if this is, if this is what you're going to require, I'm going to pull everybody out of here. So, and I have to listen to what they said
Okay.
again this morning. Um, but I forget the term that they used. They have like a third party representing them in the United States. So it doesn't look like they are operating themselves. They're strictly an Australian company. And in fact, they just had to cut out anybody new coming from the UK because the UK has just gone nuts.
Yeah, they have. And so with Caleb and Brown, you have to understand the nature of the beast. So it's not a bank and it's outside the United States anyways. To ask for an SSN, you can actually give them a fake number because they're not going to verify it. They could verify it, but they're not going to. That's my guess. And so you could literally give them a fake number because
Oh, they
probably
they they insist that they are not reporting anything to the
they're
IRS.
not. They're not. But asking for the SSN, I don't like that either. But there again, you can give them a fake number. Give them a fake number, see what they do. If they come back and say, can you confirm this is the correct number? Then tell them it is the correct number. How do you know it's not? And that will tell us if they are, because you can subscribe and verify the number if you wanted to. They're not going to do that. They don't have a duty to report. They're not under a treaty. They're not a bank. But yeah, that's interesting. Again, it's not creating a tax liability at all. People,
I'm going to listen to that again. I don't know if there's
yeah,
anybody
I'd like to know
here
more.
that's with Caleb and Brown, but if you're in Jay's group, it was a very, very good presentation this morning.
Okay.
So
Well,
I'll
just
get back
understand
to
it's
him.
we're gonna see more and more of it because I think people they want to frustrate people so much that people say, fine, I'll get a blockchain based ID. You'll just give in, which is the whole idea. Let me get to so someone's
So,
asking about BOI information. Don't report it and watch my videos. Don't report BOI stuff to FinCEN. Yeah, just don't do it. And yes, Caleb said to me that biometric and other info are part of the Australian government. Yeah, but you're not in their jurisdiction.
somebody in chat said that Caleb was asking for biometrics on every member
Okay,
of the
so
LLC.
it's back to what I said before about, asking if Caleb and Brown is insured for a data breach involving the collection, use, and storage of my biometric data. Because you can make a claim against Caleb and Brown in the United States District Court.
So you can do what?
You have a remedy is what I'm trying to explain. I know it sounds a little complicated, but if a foreign company wants to collect your biometric data for any purpose, ask if it has the ability, financial responsibility to compensate you in the event of a data breach for such sensitive information, and ask for its policy regarding where it's being held and for what purposes.
I
And
would be reluctant to do that just because Caleb and Brown might say, well, no, we don't have to do business with you then.
exactly,
So
exactly.
I doubt that I'm going to do that.
Most people will think that way, but what are we going to do? I mean, like Jay has control over he influences like thousands of people, and there are options. They're not as easy as Caleb and Brown. I'm not going to get into that, but you're not going to eventually, you're just every way you deal with third parties is going to be like that. I don't know what the breaking point is where people just say, fine, I'll just go on the dark web and write some software that does exchanges for people. You can do software that does exchanges for people so you can settle transactions in dollars
Ada, no,
and keep
not
it on
now.
the system. So
Jay, in a situation where you're directed by the stop it, the IRS considers you uncollectible, and then all of a sudden they find out you've got all this crypto, that's going to be a big problem.
sure. So don't let them see it.
All right. Keep
You
it
can
in an
always
LLC.
you
Keep it
can
in an
always move.
LLC.
Well, I mean, it's cryptos. It's like gold in your sock drawer, right? I mean, it's cryptos. If you can't hide cryptos, I can't help you. It's real easy to hide cryptos.
All right.
I mean, if you don't know anything else, just put your important coins into a paper wallet.
They say that's one of the most unsafe ways to store it, that you
Oh,
have to store it in a
there's a
hardware wallet.
security issue. You can, find something that has two-factor authentication. And don't use your phone for cryptos. So you can have third-party custodianship as well. You can do it offshore too. So, who is it? Bullion Star in Singapore. they have, I believe they have custody. If you have a large amount, and let me know because I can help you with that. But you can have custodianship through vault services of some of your cryptos. If you're working with tens of millions of dollars, let me know because I have a better option. If you're
I,
working with a few 100,000, there's so many other options that are so easy to get to.
I have one coin that might make me a billionaire. Might.
All right. Well, hey,
No.
let me know. So I just, anyways, I just wanted to bring that up and we can talk more. There's more detail. It's not, you know, I don't want to create a bunch of work for y'all, but I do want to answer the question of what the heck with this KYC? Just know that it's not about creating a tax liability and who cares if the government can see everything. I don't like giving up the data, but I can make the party getting it responsible to me. And I can do it under my own terms. All right, stop, Batman. All right. Does that create any questions for anybody? Somebody else had his hand up, but I missed it. BOI. Bullshit. It stands for bullshit. Beneficial owner information. This is the same information we're giving to the banks, right? So now FinCEN tries to scare people into believing that you have to report your BOI information to FinCEN outside the state that you just reported it to and the banking system and all that stuff, which is not true. We covered that quite well. But anyways,
Will you be able to get this up before you go away for the holiday? And
I'm not going away. I'm just not going to have a call on next Thursday and the Thursday after. But
okay,
what I will do, I will publish this just like it is. I'm not going to edit it.
okay.
This is an opening discussion. It can go further, but I really think there's a time when I'm kind of inspired and motivated by the new federal administration. I think it looks promising. It's going to be fun to watch. Not so much the administration as it is going to be watching this agency they just created with these two billionaires, Ramaswamy and Musk. I think that's fantastic. They're just going to start chopping heads off and eliminating. Woo, it's going to be fun. So
Yeah,
I'm a little bit motivated.
they just tried to push through a continuing resolution that had a $70,000 a year pay raise for Congress. Did you see that one?
Yeah, hilarious. And what is it,
These
Mike Peterson?
fools.
Yeah, Mike, whatever his name is on his way out.
Johnson.
Johnson, yeah. Can I get a charging order protection by adding a member? Okay, if you have 2-member LLC or more, then you got charging order protection. But writing into the bank, I'm sure they have no ownership. Yeah, so the articles themselves gives you the charging order protection, okay? In the operating agreement, you can identify the other person you added in there as a nominee. You can write him out of any benefits if you want to. That's called a nominee owner. But nobody needs to know that. That's why I tell you guys, don't disclose your operating agreement. That's why I give you a fake one. Not to just give you the fake one, but to teach you that you can do that. And you should do that. You should lie. Sometimes you have to lie when you're not defrauding somebody. Lie when you're protecting your privacy. That's the way we get privacy these days. We have to lie sometimes.
So are you saying that you can nominate 4 people besides yourself and you don't have to provide data for them?
I'm going to do it. I'm going to call up some friends and partners. I'm going to say, hey, would you guys mind if I named you as an owner in my LLC? I'm going to use this LLC for this thing over here. Now they know me. And so it's about if they trust me, right? They don't know if I'm going to make a deal with the mafia and start laundering money. So that's the problem, right? So because people know me, I could probably get a few people, maybe 4 people, to be nominee owners of an LLC for banking purposes. And I would be completely upfront with them and I would tell them exactly what I'm doing. So you just have to know some people. That's why I keep telling you, it's so important to be associated with other people of like mind if you can, or get into groups that are people like that so you can work with them in that capacity. That does help. So just, I wanted to make these points so that you can think this through for yourself. And let me just tell you a little bit how I did some of this real quick, and then I won't go on anymore. Yeah. Yeah, the banking abstract. You don't give your abstract. Okay, the abstract documents for the bank. Okay, if you want to make the real terms, that's in your operating agreement, that 19-page document. Don't show that to anybody except between yourselves. So what I did is I went and I searched on Google and I found, I don't use Google, I use something else, but I searched the internet for the PDF version of the text, the complete text for the Patriot Act, for the AML law, for all these different laws. I got all the text, and then I took those URLs and I fed them into the AI. And I said, please read and review the text of each of these laws, and said, okay, in 1 second. And then I went and asked it a bunch of questions to analyze it for me. This was like probably over 10,000 pages of legislation. This is what you can do. I'm just sharing that with you because this is how you're able to look things through. That's why I'm able to get you. I did all this today. It took me like an hour and a half.
So that's how Congress can read a 1,500-page document.
No, they don't read shit.
No.
They should be fired. I mean, if anything,
Probably.
if the Speaker of the House wants to push a bill like that, they should always vote no on it and don't read it. Always vote no, but they're not because they're all complicit in the same wasting money.
It shouldn't even come to the floor.
But they shouldn't by now because they should know that all their colleagues are going to vote no because you didn't give them enough time to read it during the holidays.
But they
They
don't
should be
care.
introducing bills in the holiday season anyways. After Thanksgiving, forget it. After Thanksgiving, shut up. End the session, whatever. Anyways, so I don't know. I hope that gives you something to think about. But I think we should be doing something about this instead of complaining, going, "Oh, it's happening again." We should do something. So hopefully this is a bit of learning that maybe it's a tool that you can use. And I think the pleading can be a lot better. I'll be more than happy to distribute if you guys want. I can put it on Telegram if you guys want. I may revise it. Give me a week or so because there's a lot of ranting in there that I shouldn't have. It's not necessary. Now, part of it is to just make a point. Like, for example, claiming that the government failed to prevent these crimes is part of the problem is not necessary. I just wanted to say it, right? A registered agent, okay. A registered agent can be any named anything, okay? But it must be a physical location that a process server can serve process on. That means you come into a location, you knock on the door, and a person answers, and that person will accept service for the LLC. Now, they don't you can, if your mailbox service officially offered this to you, you could do it with the mailbox service, but they don't do that. The government wants you to have an actual person, like it could be your home address, it could be your Aunt Joni in another state, not another state, I'm sorry. It has to be in the state where the company's organized. So here's what I do for clients. As you guys know, I just name the client as the registered agent for his own company. And if he doesn't like that, I just put Charlie Brown. It doesn't matter. And then I give him a real address. Now, in many cases, I give them a business address that might be in the same state where the company is situated. And I go to loopnet.com and I find an office space and I use that address. That's not where you're getting mail. That's a registered agent. It's a valid address that meets the legal criteria, but no one's ever going to serve process anyways. And if he does, you're going to know months in advance. So it's not going to help you to pay an agent $150 a year and deal with that. That's why I name the client as the agent or a fictitious name as the agent. So the answer is you can use a fictitious name, but a real address, okay, as your registered agent. I just figure it's one less thing to deal with if I do it that way for you. Yeah, yeah, we know about the social engineering and the cryptos and all the bio data connected, right? Yeah, and if you go to Ace of Coins discussion group, all right? What about that? Yeah, there's a discussion group too. You guys, I thought you knew that. So you guys can talk about that if you want. Yeah, it would be so nice if we can have groups of people doing things. There's a lot that we can accomplish. I mean, really, it just comes down to like 4 or 5 people getting together and saying, we should all get together and do this thing. I'm real good at doing this. I'm real good at doing this. I mean, that's how I get business done. I call up a guy that does websites. And then if my partner needs something, I say, call this guy. He does websites, merchant accounts or whatever. Yeah, I agree with you, Em, on that. If you have an issue where there's a lot of people that are affected, forget class action, okay? You don't want to make some attorney rich, and it's not effective to do a class action. What's more effective, I think, is to do many, many complaints, versions of the same complaint. Discord link, the Discord link. Yeah, thanks for that, Discord. We have a new Discord for promotional, but yeah, there's the discussion group there too. See on the internet. Yeah, we could create a group if you guys want. Let me know. I mean, we've spoken about this before. Discussion forum is kind of generic, but we can do something. Look, get me involved in something specific. All right. If I can be involved in something that's important to y'all, like 4 or 5 of you or 50 of you, and I can do it maybe for, on a short-term basis that would help you, I'll look for that. So I may have some opportunities coming up. We're gonna do an SEC PPM, private placement memorandum. I may have something coming up into this next year. If some of you want to have a place to place some capital. I've never offered this before, but maybe this coming year, there might be some pretty cool things we can do. So we'll talk about that next year, but I don't have anything more to add. Nothing to add.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You were kind enough to send me the generic version of the operating agreement because when I tried to set up about a year and a half ago, the LLC with Caleb and Brown, they insisted on having the operating agreement. And you said I could give them that. Now, obviously I need to make the changes so that it reflects my LLC, my New Jersey LLC. But I can give them that operating
Yeah,
agreement.
use the one from the abstract, not the big long one. You need the abstract one to give to third parties. Don't use the real one.
The abstract one. The one you sent me was a long one.
Okay, so don't give that to anybody. You can
Don't
prepare.
give that to anybody. Okay, that's what I want to
Yeah,
make sure.
just use the one I give you for banking purposes. That's the one with the banking resolution.
It's one page or 2 pages.
It's very short. The thick
Okay,
one is like 2 pages.
okay.
So you could just, edit and replace everything that you want. Yeah, I think, I was telling my children, I said, I'm gonna bet that very soon, maybe the next 10 years or so, there's gonna be some claim of an alien invasion or something, just like the phony pandemic, it'll be something like that. And I think that's possibly why we're seeing drones or flying around in New York and they're pretending like they don't know anything about it, which is, they're lying. So yeah, it could be something like
Werner von Braun said that on his deathbed. He said that there's going to be an alien invasion and it would be fake.
yeah.
And you know what he has on his tombstone?
What?
He has Psalm 19, verse 1.
What is that?
And the heavens, oh, well, I'll look it up real quick. I've got it around here somewhere. But it's amazing because he knows the earth has a firmament.
Very interesting. Yeah, yeah, it
Yes,
does.
he does. He knows
So
the earth has a
it is,
firmament.
it is,
And you know about Admiral Byrd who went to the South Pole a couple times?
yes, I saw
Okay.
that
Well, the
documentary.
second time he went, he took it was a huge armada that went
Yeah,
and something like 4,000 people. And he was losing airplanes because they were flying into the firmament and crashing,
right.
exploding into
Yeah,
the firmament.
yeah. Good luck finding that research. It is legal to use a fictitious name as a registered agent. That's why I use the name Charlie Brown. If you don't know who that is, the Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown, not a real person. Or I'm sorry if Charlie Brown's out there somewhere. I'm not trying to offend you, but but Charlie Brown, the cartoon character, okay? You can use Bugs Bunny. Really. Nobody cares. It just has to be a place. I like to use a name because that looks normal, somewhat, and a real address. And it does not have to be an address where you actually receive mail. It's not for receiving mail. It's for receiving service of process. So when you put that on the articles, it meets the legal criteria. If you put an address and a name where you'll never get process and you're not paying attention and your company gets sued and you'll never know it, that's on you. But just understand you're not going to get sued without knowing about it for months in advance. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it that way. All right. Requesting
I
a bit.
found it.
All
I
right, cool. Post it here in chat.
Okay, so it's Psalm 19, verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork.
Okay. Well, it's all there. The Bible tells you everything.
It really does. And when I started learning about this flat earth stuff, that's when I started taking the Bible seriously because
Yeah.
it proves what the Bible says.
Read the Bible. It tells you everything.
Yeah,
There's no excuse for ignorance of some, important stuff. The Bible tells you everything.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, the PPM, I mean, that's just something I'm doing so that I can, I mean, you guys are members, right? So we could talk about, interest in companies and that does, I'm not restricted that way, but that means I'm just gonna bring in new capital that I never did before. So anyways, yeah, with the Discord link, I don't know, Batman, you have it, right? I have a Discord. It's not really, well, I had the guy who's promoting what I'm doing, he set up that. So he's building out the social media. So I don't know that I have that handy. I'm sorry, I kind of don't get involved in the technical part. I try to focus on other things. Thanks for doing that, Batman. Yeah. I'm trying. Did I miss anything, Moko? Are you looking at the chats?
Hey, John, I
Moko,
have a question for you.
do that. Yes.
Uh, this is Alex, by the way. So, when you have maybe several beneficial owners and you want to disperse that responsibility, and you want maybe, I don't know, 3 of them or 4 of them to be nominees, those beneficial owners are still considered members on the amended articles, are they not?
Sure. That's why you add them.
Right. So they're members on the articles, and then when you go into your own organizational files, which no one will ever see, you basically make that distinction that they are just nominees, correct?
You would do that just to be clear in the operating agreement, you divest those owners of any rights or privileges associated with the company.
Right.
And yeah, and you can even use the term, these are merely nominee owners, and that's a private document. Don't disclose it, you know.
So when you give the memorandum to a bank and you want to open an account, they're just going to see what's the percentage they would see on the beneficial ownership of those members.
Well, you can lie and put whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why in the operating agreement controls the property rights of the LLC. And that's why I tell you, don't give it to the bank. Give them the fake one. You could just, like, if your purpose is to split up the ownership so you have under the 25%, well, then you just say everybody has 24% or something like that, right?
Right.
%, yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Right. Let's see how many- Interesting. All right. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank
Appreciate
you, John.
this helps. I hope it's
It was really great.
we're
Thank
gonna
you.
continue this discussion.
Thanks,
So
John.
if it prompted some questions, definitely let's bring it up next year. Enjoy your holidays. See you next year.
Thanks,
Happy New Year.
John. Merry
Hey,
Christmas.
can you post this?
I will do that. I'm gonna wait for it to render right now. I'll do it tonight.
Have a good couple
Thank you
weeks.
so
right,
much.
thanks so
Bless
much.
your heart. God
Thank
bless
you,
everybody.
everybody. Yeah, you guys
God
too. bless you.
Take
bless.
care.